right, Cammie, you are a third generation from a custom home building family who has branched out to start your own division for custom homes. I looking at your profile, doing all the Google sleuthing that I could possibly do. Um, your company, your family's company has been in business for over 50 years, and your grandfather was one of the first contractors licensed in Arizona, and your grandmother was one of the first female construction executives. And that part alone I got really excited about when I read about your grandmother because I
Mhm.
think so many women that are in family tradition passed down businesses, um they are, especially our age and younger, they're the first female getting into the business.
Mhm.
And it's always been the sons and the nephews, and then all of a sudden the daughters are getting involved. But your grandmother was involved since the beginning. I love that whole thing. So, from a family perspective, have your were both of your parents involved as well? Like, has it been like whole family and not
Mhm.
just passed down to the boys in the club?
Yeah, absolutely. It has. So my grandparents, as you mentioned, started the company. We've been a production luxury builder from, gosh, we started in 1969. And my grandparents just, I think there was equal respect there. My grandmother was an entrepreneurial and definitely a woman ahead of her time. She was involved in marketing. She was involved in advertising in general. She had a plethora of experiences that I always loved to listen to. She actually passed away when she was 97, sharp as a tack, such an intelligent person. And so that created the foundation for my dad. He actually took the business to the level that it is now. My grandparents started it, and really my dad took the name and almost, I would say, it's technically third generation, but really the operationally it's almost second generation. And so my parents were equally involved in the business as well. My dad met my mom. She was, I think, getting a real estate license at the time. And she too was very entrepreneurial. So the two of them, it's kind of ironic. My dad was more the design side, and my mom was more the business, working with the bank, the attorney, very opposite of what people would initially think. And and so I think with my dad having the background of my grandmother, he had full respect for my mom in terms of working with her as a partner. And
Yeah.
then my involvement, I know we'll get to maybe in a little bit, but I will say, I grew up just, it's part of the family. Like I feel sorry now today for like our spouses, my brother's spouse and my spouse, because there's no getting away from it. It's like, it is an integral, it's like a language. So, um, but, uh, but yeah, so growing up, I worked in the business just in high school, filing and kind of getting familiar with the very basic aspect of it. So,
So when you were in high school, did you know you were going to be in the company business? Were you headed that direction? What was your idea? What was your path after high school? What did
so
you think it was going to be?
honestly, I had no idea. And that was really challenging, witnessing my entrepreneurial parents who had a vision and a focus and a discipline and an answer for everything. And I had an answer for nothing. In fact, I say this as a late bloomer in terms of my academics. I think looking back, I probably had a learning challenge that I have two boys that have been diagnosed with. So I probably had some learning challenges, but it took to a junior year. I had a high school counselor that said something that wasn't quite nice. He said, Cammie, you may not be college material. And And I just remember kind of being crushed by that. And I had these friends and parents that were all really successful. And so it was a turning point for me to like really take life a little bit more serious and buckle down and figure out how to study. But all the while, I didn't know if I didn't know if I wanted to be in the family business. If anything, that was a turning point for me. Um, I wanted to be outside the family business, start my career outside the family business because I wanted to prove to myself that I could be successful on my own.
Yeah. Well, I think your counselor's saying that. Rude for starters, right? But I'm a firm believer that there are people who are meant to go to college and there are people who aren't, right? There's not one
Yeah.
better than the other, but when you have your mind set that you just saw this as your path, you knew that you were going to college, that was your next step. You didn't know what for, you didn't know what you were going to do, but it sounds like in your mind that was the path. And then someone who's supposed to be an authority, someone who's supposed to
Mhm.
be helping students just says, yeah, maybe that's not your path. I,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine how that felt walking out of that room. And there's so many different ways that people can respond to that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you turned it into motivation.
I did. I did. And I don't know, like looking back, if there are people that college isn't a path for them. And maybe he was like, hey, let's explore these other options. But the message that I took was more on the negative side. And so it just switched a light in me. And I became a little bit obsessed with learning. That's it created a seed, like a lifelong passion of learning. I went from being intimidated, I think, and overwhelmed to being focused and disciplined and sometimes almost a little bit to a fault where like in college, I wasn't a partier. I was the focus and study and actually ended up graduating college with honors. So I kind of wish I could go
Congrats.
back and give my report card to to that counselor. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I would totally want to give them the report card. I would totally want
Yeah.
to shove that right in their face. I I'm similar to you. Like if somebody tells me I can't do something, oh, I will figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
I just the other day somebody was like, "Hey, we've been trying to do this for 2 years and we haven't found a solution. You just need to try something different." And I was like, challenge accepted. And it took me less than 1 day and I accomplished it. And I'm like, this is just tell me I can't, and I will figure out how I can most of the time.
Yeah.
And so okay, so let's talk about you went to college. What degree did you end up? Did you start with the same degree that you graduated with? What is that?
Oh my gosh. So no, I didn't end with the degree that I started with. I had mentioned to you kind of a funny story as we're preparing for this podcast. I got involved with teenage Republicans. I had a history class that had a crush on a guy that actually went to KU, the school that I ended up going to, and he was involved in teenage Republicans. So I got involved in teenage Republicans, and it was actually a really great experience. And so I had my eyes set on doing something like in the White House, and all the people that did that were had law degrees. And so I was pre-law going, I thought it sounded so smart. And then I actually started out at KU. It was a really cold winter. I'm from Arizona, realized how much I love the desert, transitioned to ASU. And at that point, was sitting in classes and just kind of wasn't loving it. And so I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I was still in that, like when I mentioned in high school, just trying to figure life out. And I had some good friends that were getting degrees in communication. And it seemed generic enough that figure if you can talk and communicate, you can get your way through life. And so that's the degree I ended up going with.
The transition from law is interesting because there are times when I have felt like this is the next step. This is the next bar. This is what I want to do. This is who I want to be. And then as I'm chasing that, I'm like, do I really? Right. And
Mm-hmm.
then there's something that's kind of hard about stepping away from it. It kind of, for
Mm-hmm.
me, it kind of feels like, wait, I've said I was going to be this big thing, and now I don't want to be. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
does that make me feel like a failure? And it did at
Mm-hmm.
times, for me, like when I reached that construction, the operations, the managing director position, when I was the owner's rep, like these felt like the top positions that I had
Mm-hmm.
been searching for. And yet when I got there, it wasn't fulfilling me the way that I wanted it to. And to step back from something that's supposed to be such a big deal, it
Mm-hmm.
kind of feels it's hard to step away from it because it does feel like, oh, people are going to want, well, oh, she couldn't cut it there. Well, it's not about you not being able to cut it. It didn't fill that bucket for you, right?
Yeah. And I will piggyback onto that and say life is so interesting, the fluidity of life when you do make those changes. Um, and the doors that open as a result of the change. So I um I ended up randomly meeting this woman. Well, I wanted to get an internship in junior year of college. I had a goal for senior year, get an internship. That's the next step. I didn't know what it was. And I ultimately met this woman who, unbeknownst to me, was the president of a news station. She heard that I was looking for an internship and knew my degree and said, why don't you come down to the station and talk with me and we can see if there's something that we can figure out. And so that turned into a 6-month paid internship. I was the only paid intern. And I got to rotate through all the different departments of the station. And if I hadn't made that change to a communication degree, I wouldn't have had that experience.
Yeah, that's a cool experience. So how did that experience transition to you getting back or going back into the family business? How did that happen?
So that was a little bit of a journey. So I worked at the station for a couple of years out of college. I wanted to develop my career further. I'm not materialistic, but I do have goals and drive. And I noticed in the parking lot the people that drove the nicest cars were either the anchors or the sales associates. So I'm like, there's only a couple of spots for anchor position. There's several sales associate positions, but at the time there weren't any openings. So that led me to just starting to talk with people and figure out what next steps would be and should I go back and get an MBA? And I was actually talking to a woman about that. Again, another door opened, and this woman said, "Oh, well, there's this company that sells software product to developers in Phoenix, Vegas, and Tucson." So that sounded interesting. So I met with the company, and lo and behold, I ended up getting this job. And a lot of the dinner conversations I had grown up with started to come to light because we're helping with the data that I collected or that I sold, help developers in their due diligence on whether or not they're going to buy these parcels of land, what the inventory looked like, how sales were occurring in these different markets. And then from there, one of our clients was a land broker and actually happened to be a family friend as well. And he offered me a position. And his position was basically double the pay of where I was at. And it was very enticing. So I jumped on that. But once I landed there, the environment just didn't align with how I operate. It was there were a lot of boosters, very unorganized, and ultimately, I felt like I was fired a little bit because of my connections, who I knew. And I just it didn't sit right with me. So my dad actually, knowing that I was in this place of being lost, reached out and said, "Hey, why don't you come and try and work in the family business?" And so I really had nothing to lose at that point other than a little bit of a pay cut. My dad made that clear that I would be making the same. But I figured if anything, it could be just like an opportunity for me to reset and figure out what I want to do. And that was, gosh, I'm getting old. That was over 20 years ago. So it ended up being a good change.
Yeah. Well, and I haven't told you this, but my dad owned an HVAC company, so mostly residential. So I my brother had an opportunity to go work in the business. I never did. It's not that he didn't think I could do it. I don't think it ever
Yeah.
crossed his mind, but the idea of me going to work for my dad and it lasting 20 years, yeah, no, there's no chance that happens. My dad
Yeah.
and I are way too similar for that to happen. I love my dad, but no. So I'm very curious how how did that 20 years go before you
Oh,
transitioned into your own
yeah.
division?
It has been an interesting journey. Yeah. Growing up, my parents have, again, kind of getting back to what I said initially, they always have had drive and know what they want to do, and um anything others do, they could do better. So I initially started out working with people in the company, just assisting here and there, helping out in sales, helping out in marketing. And then eventually, as my role grew, I started working closer with my parents. And I was challenged in like trying to figure out that relationship. I had a number of years of work experience under my belt, but being next to my parents at work, it didn't feel like an adult relationship. It felt sometimes like adult child relationship. And um, what they said goes. And so it was a little bit it created self-doubt in me, and it was hard to grow in that environment. Um, and it took a long time for me to kind of build up some internal guts to be able to say, no, I do have a voice here. I am capable to give an opinion, and um, I add value to different conversations. And so there was one day in particular that we have this community that was just about to open. And at the time, I was heading up marketing. And as part of marketing, I was in charge of putting signage out. And I had this beautiful sign installed. And no sooner than, like, I don't know, within 24 hours, I got a call from my dad saying, "Cammie, that sign needs to move just a little, like 3 feet to the left." And it's just like, are you kidding me? And at that point, I just had this wave of like frustration and courage came over me. And I said, I can't make a decision about an effing sign. And at the time, I believe I was about 40, I'd never used the F word in front of my dad. So I think it shocked us both, but it kind of reset that relationship. And so that was really a pivotal point in me feeling like, hey, I can talk to them, I can voice some ideas, and I am an adult. So there's definitely a level of respect there. But listen to me. And so overall, I would say I've had so many learning opportunities working with my family. They've been great mentors. Um, but it was hard to grow under them. And so that kind of answered that. And then maybe we'll get into a little bit about, yeah, what I ended up doing from there.
Yeah, so it took a while for you to find your voice, and I think it takes a while for anybody to find their voice in a company, but in a family business, I hadn't really thought about that aspect of it feeling like that parent-child relationship until something happens that makes the shift happen. And
Mhm.
that 3 foot move on a sign, who knew that would be the thing that would make it happen, right? But it was the final, it sounds like it was the final straw. Like you had
Yeah.
been taking and taking and taking, and finally we're like, no, I have made a really good decision. This is good. This is, and you stood up for yourself, and all of a sudden your parents are like, oh, wait a second. I and in the relationship, the dynamic changed at work, and I think that's fantastic. So, talking about changes at work, let's talk about what you do now, because a
Mhm.
few years ago, your company has been doing custom homes for a long time, but
Well, they're actually, just to be clear, it's we've done high-end production homes, so they aren't custom. It's you can think of like community neighborhoods. So we've built, depending on the year, we would build anywhere from 40 to 100 homes, and a particular community could have 13 lots or it could have up to 40 lots. And you have the traditional like 3 floor plans that people can select from. But all the while, it's an alternative to custom. Our average price point is like $2 million. So it's production on steroids. So
right. Well, and my understanding was you guys had done some custom homes, and you were
yes,
looking you were
yes,
looking for a way to make that a really great experience
yes,
for clients. And
yeah.
so, and then there's a little part about your brother that I like. I like that
Oh,
part of the story. For you to
yeah.
tell that part as well, and then explain what you're doing today and why you've chosen to do it.
Sure, sure, sure. So, I will say for to what you mentioned, over the course of time, we have had people independently say, "Hey, can you build? I've bought a lot here. Can you build a custom? We love either your floor plan or." People that have been in the business, in the industry, really respect us, and so they've said, "Can you build a custom for us on the side?" And um, it was like a very unique scenario. Well, for a number of years, we talked about being cycle protected by the year 2030. And we had ideas of what that looked like. One of them was starting an actual true custom division and custom and renovation work. Another one was single family rentals. There's a plethora of ideas. So the story with my brother goes, I was at a convention with my dad. So my brother actually, he worked under me. I'll give you a little bit more background. It's kind of fun. He was in the music industry, wanted nothing to do with the family business. Um, and slowly as he got closer to like being marriage age and wanting a family, he realized the limitations of the music industry, sadly, to be able to support a family. So this is a guy that anytime we had family or discussions around the dinner table about work, he kind of say, "Can you stop talking about work?" Like he really was put the just really tried to have his own path. And so at one point, we were looking for a sales associate for a community, and he was living out of town at the time. And he said, "Well, I'd be interested." And we all like our jaws dropped to the ground, like, "What? You're interested?" And so he got his real estate license and ended up working under me. I trained him, and the week that I trained him, he had 3 sales. I didn't even have time to train him on contracts yet. And he had a gig in San Diego that weekend. So he does the sales, turns to me and says, "Can you do the contracts?" And I joke that I went from being his boss to his administrative assistant in a short period of time. But that was several years later. We're at this conference. It's called the Pacific Coast Builder Conference. And my brother, I guess, had gone to my dad and was just trying to brainstorm on what his career path would be. And the next really step up would be the role that I was doing. And so he told my dad he was interested in that. What would that take? And so my dad, I didn't know that they had this conversation, said, "Hey, Kim, we just want you to know that Trent's inquiring about your role." And I at first I was like, "Oh, well, where does that put me?" But then I remember just those conversations we've been having about creating these different divisions, and the timing was really interesting in that I actually had a girlfriend that reached out and wanted to do this major remodel of a home. I didn't tell you this, a home that Camelot had built in the 1970s in an area called McCormick Ranch, had not been touched like in 30 plus years. It was a model at one point. So it was like completely retro. And so literally within this short period of time, I had this person reach out. I had my brother and my dad talk, and I thought, there's an opportunity here to start this custom division. So if Trent wants to take my role, then I asked my parents, would you be up for me just really focusing on this division, getting it up and running? And they supported me and actually gave me carte blanche to run it. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I've seen several articles on the custom homes and renovations division. I watched the video of your showroom. Your showroom is amazing. Like
thank you.
I wish I could come walk through it. I was telling you earlier that that tub that's in there, like that's insane. They to tell the listeners, there is a tub in their showroom that has a heated back and keeps the water temperature the same temp. Like this tub is amazing. Like I wish I had it today. But the showroom was amazing, and it just showed me that you have not only taken this idea, but you have ran with it to make it feel like you are the custom home builder of choice. Like it just feels like you walk in and you get to see all of your options. And it just felt like a place that would feel comfortable. Because I think a lot of people, I have a very close friend going through a custom home build right now in St. Louis. And I can tell you that she does not feel comfortable. She does not feel like she's being listened to. She feels like her husband's being talked to instead of her. And they're talking over her head. They're talking over his head. They're not in construction. They
Mhm.
sell insurance for a living. Like they
Mhm.
they are very good at their jobs, but they don't understand construction. So they call me and like contractor said this, or the designer said this. And I'm like, okay, no, let me help you. Let's do this. And just the impression that I have looking at your website, looking at your showroom, listening to you talk, it is that next level where customers can really feel like they are part of it and they're not being
Yeah.
talked at and not being talked to.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I would say for me, I am all about relationship building, no matter what the format is. Maybe it goes back to my communication degree. I don't know, but I think ultimately, innately, I just love people. So there's no greater opportunity than to build someone's home. And there's different experiences that I've had with clients, whether it be this is their first custom home to this is their, they've done it, been there, and just want us to make the selections. I enjoy the whole genre of clients and being able to experience the design and build of the home. It is a challenging experience. There are a lot of we try to make it as structured as possible, but there are unknowns that pop up. And so having that sense of relationship, that sense of trust to work from is mission critical. So
Yeah.
for me, I hope that's a differentiator for us. I know people can speak to it, but I've experienced some challenges with clients and they're really upset and And rightfully so. There are things that do happen. But once we start to talk, I kind of let them know, I really truly feel like each one of the clients are extension of family to me. Like I treat them that way. So,
Well, and I think for anyone listening, when we're talking about customer experience, if you're a general contractor, that customer experience may be your owner's rep, it may be your client, it may be, I mean, in making them feel like there is that trust, but there's also this safe zone. I think too often in our industry, we talk over people's heads, especially to other people in the industry, because we think that they know what we're talking about.
mm,
And too many times, our clients have owners, reps, or someone that just doesn't have the experience that we have as contractors, subcontractors, tradespeople. And we take that for granted and talk over their heads. And then it doesn't feel like it's a safe zone. It doesn't
mm,
feel like it doesn't make them comfortable to ask
mm,
questions because, oh, there's a heavy sigh that follows it, or there's an eye roll, or there's what do you mean you don't understand what that means, right? Instead of taking each person and helping understand where they're at, meeting them where they're at, is such a big component of customer experience. And granted, like I built schools and hospitals for most of my career as a superintendent. So a lot of the end users that I worked with, I knew that they wouldn't understand the construction terminology, but I did my best to try and help them understand. And the relationship that forms when they feel like, oh my gosh, she's actually going to explain to me what they're doing, it is that relationship that lasts for a really long time. And I think that's important for anyone in their customer experience, whether you're an estimator trying to get numbers to a sub or a GC or whomever, that's your customer, and making sure that you're meeting them where they're at and not assuming what they know and how to work with them.
Yeah, I think it is critical to look at everyone from just how would you, if you have a good relationship with your family, how would you treat that person if they were a family member? Like you want to help people out. So,
Yeah. Okay, wrapping up, the last question that I ask everybody, what is one constructive behavior that you would recommend for listeners that would help them in their career or in their companies?
mhm. So I was introduced to this concept, failing forward. It was a huge light bulb moment for me. It's basically the concept allows you to not put so much pressure on yourself to get everything right the first time. And so it gives you grace to know, hey, I'm gonna attempt this and give it my all. But if it doesn't go exactly as planned, we're gonna learn from this experience and really collect the data, not just it happened. Really assess where things went wrong and recalibrate and try again with that information. So I had a great visual to this in a class not too long ago. And it really was a turning point for me, in a liberating turning point, in that once you lose that fear of failure, the sky's the limit.